Our next speaker has spent over 20 years in animation and in visual effects, working at studios including DreamWorks Animation and Walt Disney Animation Studios, where he currently supervises a team in character effects, the department responsible for everything from hair and cloth simulation to the physics that make animated worlds feel real. He has worked on films many of you grow up watching, but what makes his story different is how he got here. No traditional degree, no conventional path, and a journey that started with a forgotten computer in an attic. Please welcome Kemer Stevenson.
Good luck. Can you guys hear me? How's the volume? Can everybody hear me clearly? Cool. Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. This is amazing. I absolutely am so honored to be here. I'm really excited to talk to everybody today. I'm going to need, we're looking for a clicker right now. Oh, it's up here. Okay. So if you guys came today, I got it. If you guys came today for the scheduled half-hour talk, I'm going to warn you now that this is going to go a little long. I have a tendency to ramble a little bit, and I'm going to be honest with you. We had some technical difficulties, and I'm missing my cue cards up here, so we're doing it live. We're going to see what happens. So I may go off script a little bit. But first of all, before I get started, can we please just give a round of applause to all the organizers, the students, everybody who made this happen? Like, this is my first time here, and it's just been such an incredible experience, and it's so well organized, so you guys, props to you. Thank you so much for having me. So, I want to talk to you a little bit today about games. Now, not in the typical sense that you think. I'm sorry, this is not a talk about Fortnite or Call of Duty or what's the cool game now? I'm not really sure. But I'm also not talking about any of you who might still be on your phones in the back. I can't see you over the lights, but I'm sure there's one or two of you. No, that's great. So I want to talk to you about what games you're playing, okay? And I'm talking specifically about your career. Because I've been hanging around today. I've been here since this morning. I did a workshop, actually. Was anybody here for that? Wow. Oh, wow. Okay, I thought we'd get one or two. So this is amazing. Thank you, guys. I've been kind of wandering around a little bit today, and I've been paying attention to everybody and what you've been doing and how you've been interacting and the types of conversations that you're having. And I noticed that you're all playing a game. You might not think that, but you are. You're playing a game called How Do I Maximize My Grades While Keeping My Sanity? Or you're playing a game called How Do I Guarantee That I'm Employable? Or if you're lucky enough to have your first internship or maybe your first job, you're playing the game called How Do I Prove I Belong before someone figures out that I'm still learning. By the way, I'm still learning myself, so don't feel bad. Now, I want to talk to you today a little bit about what I call drift, because it's very easy to show up in our daily lives and go about things unintentionally, and to go about your day, experiencing the world, and just essentially losing track of time. And then one day you wake up and you're not exactly where you want to be. And I call this drift. This is essentially what happens when motion gets mistaken for progress. Because we all have this tendency to work hard and try harder. And I'm a little bit older now, so this wasn't part of my slang vocabulary, but the grind culture, right? Continuing to work harder and harder and grind away. And listen, as a fellow hustler himself, I've been guilty of it. But playing the wrong games that somebody else designed the rules for, harder and harder and harder, it's not going to get you anywhere. This is drift. Drift is what happens when you just grind repeatedly at the same thing without intentionality. Now, before I came here, I did a little bit of research on the room, okay? I wanted to know who I was talking to. because I came here to talk to each and every one of you. And I want to make sure that you get something out of this. So I looked up, the obvious things, the general age range, the demographics, and the types of programs that you're studying in school, sure. But as you can see here, I went just a little bit deeper, right? And on top of this, right, I know that your school has people who come from over 60 different countries. You're very multicultural. That's incredible. I also know that your generation absorbs information faster than anybody else, and you understand something that my generation is still learning, which is that the way to get seen now is to put your work out into the world for other people to see. Now, I also know one other thing, which is that youth unemployment here in Portugal sits around 20% or so, I think, which means that you guys are actually entering one of the hardest job markets in recent history. So I want to talk a little bit about that and how you might be able to get a leg up on everybody else, okay? My name is Kemer Stevenson. I have over 20 years of experience working in visual effects and animation. I also have done some work in game cinematics as well as some in-game stuff as well. I've been doing this for a very long time, and as you can see, I've worked on some incredible projects in my lifetime. I want to share some of that experience with you today. I want to talk about what I do, though. I work in a department called character effects. Now, if you haven't heard of character effects or you don't know exactly what it is, don't feel bad, because when I first got my start, I didn't either. But if you know anything about character effects, you know us as the hair and clothing department. We're essentially the digital tailors and digital hairdressers that go into the movie-making process. But the truth is that we actually do a lot more things that people don't realize. See, we sit in the middle of the pipeline, which means we get to touch all kinds of fun things, from muscles, ropes, chains, curtains, beds and blankets, sails, balloons, even some weird fun stuff like bouncy castles. Yes, we do that too. Now, I have a personal favorite thing that we work on. You guys have sure have seen these before. The inflatable tube guys that you see outside of car dealerships. We do this stuff too. And quite frankly, these fun little one-off type things, we absolutely love. And we take them really seriously. We really do. I know it seems silly, but. So I want to talk a little bit more about this stuff later, and I'll give you kind of a behind-the-scenes look at how we create some of this stuff. Now, this is just sort of a collection of clips that I've worked on from time to time. There's various different things here, stuff I've worked on, stuff I've supervised, and it's just kind of goes to show that we touch a lot of different things throughout the process. We're really involved in everything, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth later, but we're very much in the middle of the pipeline, which means we interact with everybody, which also means we get an influence over a lot of different stuff. Honestly, it's really exciting to be a part of. So this is just kind of a quick little highlight reel of some of the things I've worked on. You saw the movie posters earlier. There's a lot more than this, so I won't bore you too much with this. We'll talk about some of the good stuff. Today, I want to talk about 3 things that I wish that I had learned earlier in my career. I want to talk to you about ownership, about courage, and about clarity. And hopefully, by the end of this, you'll have a framework that you can apply in your own lives so that you can excel in your own careers. Now, that didn't start, of course, with this clean, straight line from young, ambitious kid to Disney. I'm about to ruin that vision for you in the best possible way. It actually started in an attic, no less. True story. So when I was about 8 years old, my sister and I used to play hide and go seek up in our attic. Now, I want to paint you a little bit of a picture. This is the type of attic that was not really functional space. It was more cluttered storage, boxes and toys spilling all over and leftover furniture and things like that. It was perfect as a little kid for hiding spots. But one day, I end up going up into the attic looking for a hiding space, and instead, I find this little gem. This changed my life. This is an Epson QX10. Has anybody seen these before? Or is anybody not ashamed to raise their hand? Okay, cool, awesome. This thing was amazing. 2 5¼ inch floppy drives, 64 kilobytes of memory. I said kilo, not mega, not giga. This thing was probably outdated by the time I found it, but that didn't matter. In fact, I think that worked out to my advantage. So, my next slide here. The thing is about that is that at the time, you have to remember, there was no YouTube, there was no, it was really hard to just get online in general. There's no AI tutors or anything like that. So if I wanted to learn something, I needed physical instruction manuals, which meant I had to get creative at the time, okay? So the thing is that I actually was homeschooled. I never went to public school. So through my entire young education experience, it was basically my parents teaching me on a kitchen table through trial and error. That was my education. That was my experience. But here's the thing. Because of that, it also meant that I was never waiting for somebody to tell me what to learn next. Curiosity wasn't just encouraged. Curiosity was the entire curriculum. So after finding this computer and realizing that I needed to understand this and I needed instruction manuals, does anybody know what Radio Shack is? Probably not. Oh, wow, I do see some hands. That's awesome. Cool. So Radio Shack, for those of you who don't know, it was this electronics store back in the United States. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States originally. And it was this store, as you can see from some of the images, that it was basically just stacked floor to ceiling with parts for electronics and build your own radio kits and RC cars and things like that. The thing, though, that I remember most about Radio Shack, that tiny little store that was probably no bigger than this stage, to be honest, the thing I remember most is the smell. Pretty much it smelled like solder and disappointment whenever you would walk in. Super distinct. Those of you who've done some circuit board work know what I'm talking about. But that didn't matter. But what people didn't realize about Radio Shack was that they would throw away their old manuals out in the dumpsters behind the store, when they were done with them. If they couldn't sell something, they would all go in the trash. So I did what any young, curious kid would do. I went dumpster diving. I would go through the old dumpsters in Radio Shack, digging through for old manuals that I thought were remotely useful, and bring them home. I learned from other people's trash. That's how I taught myself how to program on that old Epson QX machine. So that was my education in this world. Again, curiosity was encouraged where I came from. The thing is that you don't always realize the things that come into your life and how they'll impact you later. When I taught myself how to program in BASIC, which isn't really a thing anymore, when I taught myself how to program in BASIC, one of the first things that I did was I wrote a program for my uncle. It was a program to track his horse betting career. My mom was super proud of that. But it didn't matter. I was basically creating something for my first client, right? Like this was a real interaction where I was building something for somebody else. And I did not realize that that was actually something that would later become my entire career, making things for other people. And honestly, I just lit up with this experience. It was amazing. But you guys recognize this, right? I'm not that old. Have people seen this? Particularly the younger crowd here? Yeah, okay. I do want to know, seriously, does the movie still hold up? Like, is it still good? You can be honest with me. Yeah, okay, good. That's good to hear because, honestly, this movie completely changed my life. I was about 15 when I went to go see it for the first time. My dad took me. Didn't tell Mom because I wasn't supposed to go to violent movies at the time. Yay, Dad. Thank you. But this movie truly changed my life. When I walked out of this movie, my mom was right. It was a violent movie at the time, for sure. But none of that registered. I never thought about it beyond anything. I left thinking about this moment right here, bullet time, because this didn't exist at the time. It was revolutionary. It was something completely new, and my mind was blown. They say that technology and magic are indistinguishable from one another, and this was magic to me. More importantly, I needed to know how it was done. I needed to know how this was created. This is when I realized that, I started looking up things online, trying to figure out how it was done. Now, this is, again, YouTube still wasn't a thing at this point, and tutorials and stuff didn't really exist, so this basically led to me, deep diving into old internet forums and things like that, which at the time were surprisingly difficult to sort through. But essentially, this was the bug that really lit me up, figuring out things like this. And the journey of trying to find the information, for me, was so much more enjoyable than actually having the information itself. It was really about the journey for me. This is when I realized that I wanted to be the person who was behind the scenes, who could create this type of magic on the screen. I never had aspirations of being the person in front of the camera or having the fame and glory. I wanted to be the person that nobody thought about that would create things like this, which, in hindsight, is kind of a weird career aspiration to be invisible. But nonetheless, here I am. So this is the movie that changed my life. Now, after that, I eventually ended up at a trade school program. Now, I want to be clear on what this was. This was not a college education. There was no degree here. There was no job placement. There was no assurance that I was going to be able to work after this. This was like an 8-month in-and-out program that essentially I was only going to get out of it whatever work and effort that I put into it. And truthfully, I didn't realize that impact when I had signed up for the program. So I get there, and I start panicking. I took out a very big school loan in order to make this all happen that I was going to have to start repaying at some point. So it was really important that I worked hard. Now, because of my technical background, my instructor ended up pointing me in the direction of focusing on rigging. For those of you who don't know what rigging is, it's sort of the invisible architecture that goes into characters that help animators make them move and emote and give their performances. I like to think of it as the puppeteers. But it also, too, wasn't the job at the time that anybody wanted. Everybody wanted these big, glamorous roles, the Pixar animators of the world, the modelers, the people who had, this thing that they could show off and demonstrate for other people. For me, I loved being the one who did the invisible work. That was exciting to me. And I really enjoyed the technical aspect of it. Now, here's the part that I didn't realize initially, but I was really pleasantly surprised to find out that the job that nobody else wanted put me in the center of everything, because everybody needed to work with me in order to make their own projects move, which was great because that gave me a big body of portfolio work that I was able to use later. And that's kind of when I realized that nobody was going to hand me a job. Nobody was going to give me something if I didn't work hard for it. And it was really up to me to insert myself and put myself in situations like that where I was valuable and useful and could help others along the way. Now, after the New York Film Academy, I started essentially telling everybody that I wanted to move to Los Angeles. I was going to work in Hollywood. That was the dream. I was Hollywood bound. So I started telling all my friends that as soon as classes are done, I'm going to move out to Los Angeles to pursue my career working in films. Because honestly, I figured if I started telling other people this stuff, then there'd be enough peer pressure and I'd have to do it no matter what. You can't back off. Has anybody ever gone bungee jumping? I went once, and you're standing on the edge, and everybody's watching you, and they start counting down. 5, 4. You can't not jump. You have to jump. Peer pressure. It works. So before this could happen, I had planned to move out to LA immediately after. I was ready. But before this could happen, my instructor comes to me, and this was like, I think it was like a week before I was ready to leave. And he comes to me and he goes, "Hey, Kemer, listen, I know you've been talking about, finding a job out in Los Angeles, and I've got this contact and you can look up when you get there, and that's great, but I have something else that I want you to do first." Okay, sure, what do you got? So he tells me, he goes, "Here's the thing. I have this friend, and he teaches this summer course. It's a course on animation, but it's like a bunch of engineering students that come in they're a little bit curious, and they just kind of want an overview, and they want to understand the process. And I unfortunately, my friend, he calls me and he told me that he had something come up over the summer and he wasn't able to teach the course. He wanted me to do it, but I'm not interested. I got a lot going on here in the city, and I can't go." He says, "But I told him you could do it." I was like, "Okay, I'm 19, okay? I'm 19, I didn't go to actual college, I don't have a degree," and he basically insists, "You have to do this." He removed every reason for me to say no. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Then he tells me it's at Harvard University. Yeah, I was scared, to say the least. This is a lot of pressure to put on a 19-year-old. But he ended up giving me a life lesson before I went. He told me that he was only a phone call away. If I needed anything, I could call him and ask questions. He said, "Listen, here's the thing. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice." First, he said, "From now until the course, stop shaving and don't tell anybody how old you are." And then he said something that stuck with me forever. He said, when you're there and people ask you questions, you're not going to know the answer to everything. You're going to have these questions and you're not going to know how to answer them. That's normal." He goes, "I get asked questions all the time and I don't know the answer." Meanwhile, I'm thinking, I just spent how much money on this course? But he said, "Listen, here's the secret. When people start asking you things that you don't know, don't tell them that you don't know." He said, "You start asking them questions back. You work with them through the process to find the answers together. And that is how you work through those situations, and you collaborate, and you build rapport and trust with people." That's always stuck with me. It's always served me well. That's not just a teaching lesson. That's a life lesson. It's always stuck with me. So I do end up moving out to Los Angeles shortly thereafter. I move out to Los Angeles, and I don't have the job yet. I move out there without the job. I started sending out my reels to every and any company that I could think of. I'm not even talking about just the companies that were in Los Angeles at the time. I was panicking about being able to start paying back the student loan. So I start sending out reels. This is back in the day when you still had to burn them on physical CDs, which honestly wasn't the worst part. It was running over to the post office to put them in the mail day after day. I got to be on a first-name basis with everybody in that post office because I was there every day with a new batch. Sent out over 100 of these, 100 different reels. For those of you who were in the workshop earlier, don't answer this, but do you know how many responses I got out of those 100 reels? Anybody? Shout a number. 5, 10? 2. You know, through the years, technology changes. You don't mail your demo reels through the postal service anymore. But some things don't change. The rejection ratio, it doesn't. It's hard. I want to talk a little bit about how to make yourself stand out. At Disney, we have a saying: get comfortable with ambiguity. Get comfortable with change. In creative work, things are constantly changing. Things rarely stay the same. And quite frankly, you don't want them to. That's boring. You want to see new things. You want to try new processes. You want to innovate. You want to be the person who comes up with bullet time. We overuse this phrase at Disney, but it's because it's so important, because the people who thrive in creative work, they're not the people who need certainty. They're the people who can navigate without that assurance. That is what makes true, resilient artists. Get comfortable with ambiguity. How many of you have been told that if you work hard enough, you grind, you have self-discipline, if you work hard enough, that good things will happen to you? That can't be all, guys. It's a lot, but look around. Keep those hands up for a second. Everybody, look around the room. Look around. Of course you have. We've all been taught that from a very young age. And here's my question. How many of you realize that it's not that simple? Just as many, if not more, hands. Yes, it's not. For so long, I've felt like if I did good work, if I kept my head down and I grinded harder, that somebody would tap me on the shoulder and give me a promotion and I'd move up the ranks and everything would be great. But the truth is that the system, it doesn't reward drift. And drift is essentially just working harder at the same thing over and over and over again. The system rewards design, intentionality. I ended up getting my first job at a company called Rhythm and Hues. Now, Rhythm and Hues no longer exists. Rest in peace. It was an amazing company that if you ever run into anybody who's worked there, you'll know it. They like to tell you about it. It's like doing CrossFit or being vegan. You'll know. But Rhythm and Hues was an incredible company. It gave me my first start. I get a call. Those two callbacks that I got from those companies. One was fine. It was a safe bet. But it was relatively boring or uninteresting for me. It was essentially a technical support role working on the render farm. They pitched it as, this is your foot in the door. And that's fine, but Rhythm also called, and they offered me a job in the department called character effects. Actually, they called it tech anim. See, the thing is that our department has a ton of different names. And people don't really realize exactly what we do because of that. It gets very confusing. But they offered me this job in tech anim, character effects. And despite my very candid honesty about not knowing what simulation was, I had no idea. I didn't know this department existed. It was not on my radar. I will say, though, that just before this, I had seen Monsters, Inc., and Sully's hair just blew my mind. So it was already kind of in my subconscious that this was something I was interested in. So they insisted they would train me. And so I said yes before I had any business saying yes. I didn't want them to change their mind. So I dive in. They say they'll train me. And that was the start of some amazing things. But the thing is that I was working really hard to get there. But essentially, after Rhythm and Hues, I was there for about, 3 years or so. I ended up moving over to DreamWorks Animation, also doing character effects, same deal. And I was there for about a decade of my career. The first 3 years were absolutely amazing. Like, it was new studio, I'm still learning things, I'm getting acquainted, learning the process, and every company has their own way of doing things, so I'm just like in love with the learning process. It's amazing. But the industry at the time was also, it was in a weird state. Some of this is going to sound familiar to more recent events, but this was post-2008 financial crisis, so the whole world was impacted, and studios were experiencing budgets tightening and schedules shifting, and there were a lot of studios that were just struggling to survive at that point. And so because of that climate, it made it really difficult for any kind of advancement or moving up through the ranks. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do a lot more. I felt like I had more to give. And so that's kind of when I realized that, you know, what got me here won't get me there. I was working hard for so long, keeping my head down, doing what I think was great work. Obviously, I'm biased. But I was drifting. It was more of the same over and over again. And the truth is that it was a career stuck in park, you know, where the engine's running, but you're not going anywhere. You're just sitting in the parking lot. That is what drift is. And I take full ownership for it. I was doing that myself. The thing is, though, I just thought that if I kept my head down and I worked hard enough that eventually somebody would notice. You know, I'd get that promotion, that talent rises, that hard work pays off. But the thing is that I realized that's not necessarily true, right? Look around the room. Every single person in this room is talented, right? You guys are absolutely incredible. Talent's the baseline in our industry. Talent is the price of admission. So the question is, if everybody's talented, you know, how do I stand out? How do I get ahead? How do I move up? The thing is, sometimes you just have to lean in. You have to jump before the landing is seen. You have to trust in yourself and make those big moves forward. Move before you feel ready. See, this was kind of a moment in my career where I realized that I needed to change the game that I was playing. So, after DreamWorks, I started telling everybody what I wanted to do. Again, I'm really big on this peer pressure thing, guys. I am not above it. But I started telling my supervisors what I wanted to do, that I also wanted to get into leadership. I told my peers, the Starbucks barista, pretty much anybody that would listen to me, I would tell them that I wanted to be in leadership. And the truth is, the world responded. It did. Not right away, but eventually the world responds. When you start acting on the things that you want and you act with intentionality, the world will reward you. Now, before too long, I got a call from a studio in Spain who wanted somebody to supervise their character effects team. Now, this was everything I wanted and so much more. Like, this was an absolute dream. So I decide I'm going to move to Spain. Now, here's the thing. When I get this call, I decide to do it, I've never left the country. I had never been on an international flight before. We didn't have a whole lot of extra money growing up, so we couldn't afford these big vacations. So my first international flight was a one-way ticket to a job I didn't know how to do in a language that I didn't speak, where I didn't know a single person there. That made me a stranger in a strange land. This was a lot to take in all at once. Now, I get to Spain. And it wasn't very long before I realized that there was this expectation of me that I was expected to perform from day one. And this is crazy. I still cannot believe to this day that somebody actually said this to me out loud. They tell me that I was supposed to be the silver bullet. This guy who came from this reputable company, DreamWorks, who was supposed to come in and fix all of their problems miraculously. And look, I like to think I'm talented, but come on. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. Thing is that silver bullets, they don't exist. Companies aren't fixed with one person. They're fixed by people who want to collaborate, by systems, by people who choose to build together. Now, I could understand why this company had these hopes for me and had these expectations for me. They were going through their own transition. So sometimes it's just a little bit of a misalignment of expectations. Now, the thing is that, sorry, jumped ahead too soon there. The thing is that when I showed up for that job, I was preparing for it well before I realized that I was preparing for it. The thing is before I had even declared to anybody that I wanted to work in leadership, I was watching YouTube videos. I was listening to podcasts on managing teams. I was reading books on things. I was preparing before I knew exactly what I was preparing for, because of something that I believe at my absolute core, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. So I start trying to show up as the person I wanted to be. Not the person I was, but the person I wanted to be. Especially when I didn't feel like I was that person yet. Now, did I stumble? Yes. No story is completely clean. I had moments where I had to give tough feedback to a teammate that would end up making her cry. It was important feedback, but it was tough for her to hear. I had moments of challenging things in a leadership meeting that nobody else wanted to touch, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I had moments where I had to make hard decisions that I knew were best for the entire team, but would end up making somebody very unhappy with me. And that's sometimes the cost of being in those positions. The thing is that it's important to show up. I spent so much time reflecting on each and every one of those moments, not looking for perfection, but reflection, so that I could show up as a better version of myself the next day, so that I could instill more confidence in myself. Because the thing is that confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It's a consequence of it. You need to put in the reps, do the hard work, and the confidence will come. Jump first, and the landing will appear. Now, I know that our industry is worldwide. It's not just in one place. And many of you are probably thinking about potentially leaving Portugal one day. Maybe end up in London or in California or my hometown of Vancouver. You guys have a word for this. I'm a little jealous. We don't have this word in English. Saudade, that feeling of missing something that you haven't left yet. But the thing is that every step in my career has involved leaving something behind, and every single time that's been worth it. Not because it was easy, but because or not because it was perfect either, but because growth requires movement, and movement costs something. But I needed to learn to be more than just brave. I also needed to learn how to aim. I needed to learn how to steer so that I ended up somewhere that I actually wanted to be, somewhere that I enjoyed, somewhere that was meaningful to me. And that's also when I learned that some of the best work that I've ever done, it's not the work that you see. It's the invisible work. It's the things that happen behind the scenes. It's the conversations that happen when nobody else is watching. It's the work you do when you go home in order to make yourself better. I needed to learn how to steer. Now, let's talk a little bit about what I actually do in my department, because we talked a little bit about character effects earlier. You guys remember, roughly what I do, right? Hair, cloth, fur, chains, bouncy castles. Yeah, of course. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hair and clothing of a character. This is a cross-section of a relatively average animated character, and we work in layers. So we break everything out into multiple layers. You can see we've got like the outer robe and the main dress, and there's usually like a petticoat. The hair gets broken out into several different regions. Sometimes we'll separate out the bangs in the front and the sideburns on the side. Every single one of these, they're all connected. They're all aware of one another. They influence one another too. If the robe on the top is heavy, then it pushes down the layers below it. Or petticoats will fluff out a dress even wider to maintain volume. And the hair will need to ride on the back of the cloth. And don't talk to me about hoods and backpacks and things like that. Those are just another whole level. But this is relatively simple cross-section of a character and what you could expect on a pretty average thing. But there's a lot of circumstances that involve a lot more layers. In fact, sometimes characters can involve over 20, 30 different layers. This is a character I worked on from Call of Duty. And now Ghost had, if I'm remembering correctly, my memory's a little fuzzy, but he had, I think, between 40 and 50 different simulated layers that we had to do. Every little pocket flap and belt strap and pouch, even the rigid objects like this canister on the back, we can simulate those too. We even built in the individual zippers and the cords attached to them to all move independently of each other. Now, why, you might ask? That seems like overkill. Well, part of our job, too, is anticipating things that we might need to deal with as the movie progresses. And, scripts change. Get comfortable with ambiguity. Things are constantly changing. So in this case, we're actually anticipating a scenario where it's very common for these characters like get in and out of helicopters. So we're picturing propellers whirling ahead and wind blowing, and then that shot that just zooms in close on Ghost's face, and then you got this little zipper flapping in the wind. So we try to anticipate needs of the film for things like that. But let's talk a little bit more about the entire team. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I want to talk a little bit about the physics behind things first, because every one of those layers is running through a physics solver, calculating how heavy or light the hair and the cloth are, how much they can bend, or how much your cloth can stretch. We take all of those things into consideration. Now, there's a lot of fancy words up on the screen, but that's really just to give you an example of the type of language that the people I work with use fluently day in and day out. Now that you have a basic understanding of sort of the types of things that go into this, let's talk about the team. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead again. Again, I don't have my cue cards, apologies. But all those things happen every single frame, and it's dependent upon what happens on the frame before. Now that's significant because if, for example, there's a tiny little change, an animator comes and says, oh, we just slightly moved the arm. at the beginning of the frame range, I have to do everything all over again. So everything happens dependent upon the frame before it. Now, some quick little, I love like nerdy little math. At 24 frames per second, it ends up coming out to an average of 136,000 calculations that need to happen. This is just on a single iteration. Remember, this is like work in progress. You're showing 5, 6, 7 times. So these numbers get a lot bigger. And they can double or quadruple when you start to take in these super fast actions where characters are like on this side of the screen on one frame, and then 3 frames later, they're all the way over here. That's one of the challenges that we have to deal with quite frequently. And that's, of course, per character. Now, that doesn't take into account the fact that you guys have seen an animated film recently. It seems like every other shot is this massive crowd shot. We have to deal with all of those too. They all get simulated. We deal with that from beginning to end, all of that. All this is just to say that there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff. But here's the thing that people don't realize. If you do know anything about our department, there's this running joke that we just press the simulate button and go get a coffee and then come back, later. It's done, check it. It's not true. It's very much not true. And by the way, too, another joke, I'm still looking for the make movie button, so if anybody knows where that's at, I'd love to know. But a lot of work goes into stuff, a lot of work. Let's talk about the team. So I like to think about it as like a F1 Formula Racing team, okay? Because at Disney in particular, we kind of separate out the 2 different functions. Every company is different, and they kind of have their own way of doing things. But generally speaking, it's all relatively similar-ish. We have the simulation team. There are character effects or CFX rig builders. So they're not rigging in the same way that rigging is and affects the actual joint movement of characters, but it is a rig that we can run and install and has all of the cloth garments in it or all of the hair pieces in it. And so our pit crew, I like to think of them as the ones who build the car, build the rigs, set everything up for everybody, and they're there at the beginning doing the R&D work and testing things against a number of different circumstances and performance needs, and does the character spin or twist? If you've seen a Disney movie anytime recently, you know that they love their singing and dancing scenes. Lots of dress twirling and spinning and things like that. So we're testing under those conditions early on before we actually have to use them in shots. That's the simulation team, getting everything ready. Now, they also hang out throughout the entire race because occasionally you got to swap the tires, gas it up, make sure everything is running smoothly in the car, and they're there throughout the entire process. But they take their rigs and they hand it off to the drivers, right? They're the ones who are working in the individual shots. They're the ones who are running those simulations frame by frame. They're the ones who have to navigate the course or what challenges animators throw at us, because we know there's a lot of those. But they're the ones who basically know how to manipulate things in a way to help tell the story, to get things across, to give that beautiful image in the end. And they've got a lot of different techniques to do it. We'll talk about that in a second, but that's essentially the makeup of the team. Now, early on, when we go through the design phase, right, on the top, we're working in Marvelous Designer for the initial setup of the cloth. At the bottom is Houdini for the hair. Generally, we do kind of a combination of both Maya and Houdini. Every shop's different, but the point that I really want to make here is that what people don't realize is we actually work in real-world principles. Every one of us has studied under tailors and seamstresses. We've studied under barbers and hairdressers in real life. I have literally cut hair before. I have literally sewed things together. Granted, it was just a pillow, but I tried. No, but we do things like pattern making. Why, you might ask? Well, because we've realized that we actually get better results out of it. It's a lot more predictable when we're starting with common language that we all understand and we have the same expectations and we're all aligned. So even though we're working inside a world that is very much stylized and we're working with real-world physics, we're still able to create these amazing stylized scenes independent of that. So this is the simulation team at work, starting from here and then building our rigs. And then when they're done, they hand things off to the team that does the shot work. So on the left would be like your Maya viewport. On the right would be final image. Apologies about the distortion with the compression. But essentially, you see those like blue lines that are in the back? That's basically like a directionality indicator showing which way the wind moves. And the team, when they're working inside the shots, they're not just paying attention to whether or not the cape is blowing in the right direction. They're paying attention to little details that you never think about, like does the hair cross over the eye line? Because that's distracting to the audience. We're looking for any one of those things to help really sell the performance and keep the audience engaged all the time. So this is the shot team, and they've got a multitude of different techniques that they use to achieve this stuff, from adjusting those simulator attributes that I talked about earlier to some more manual hand work where they basically get in there with sculptors and try to brute force everything into looking the right way. I usually call that the crowbar approach, and it gets used a lot more than you might think. Now, everybody likes to think of the pipeline as being this nice, easy, smooth process, right? You guys have all thought this, right? Where each department takes it, script gets handed off. BizDev, here you go, awesome. You know, do a few mock-ups, hand it off to modeling, shape things. Everybody thinks that, you know, when one department works on things and then they hand it off to the next department with a handshake or maybe a hug, and then they get to do their work, and so on and so forth down the line until you get to that beautiful final image. But how many people think it's really like that? No. Here's what I think it looks like. This is a lot more indicative of what you might see in the pipeline. Now, you'll notice here, I put character effects basically in the middle of all this. That's really just to represent that. We're a department that happens in the middle of everything, and we're constantly working with a lot of different people. There's a lot of back and forth, and as you can see, there's things happening on top of each other, and everybody has different priorities, and it involves a lot of collaboration, a lot of back and forth, and especially a lot of communication. We're a service department with a lot of different clients, a lot. The thing is that so much of that work you never see. There's so much of that work that's so important and vital to the creation of the movie. So many side conversations you have with one person or another to create these images and work together. I stopped judging my success based upon the output that people could actually see, and instead I started thinking about it in terms of what people could feel. Because the truth is, with character effects, at the beginning of this, many of you had no idea what it was. Because when we do our work right, when we get the wind fine-tuned just perfectly, or the hair sweeps just right to sell the story, you just feel it. You don't always see it, but you just feel it. And that cuts both ways. If the cape clips through a body, or the hair suddenly flickers in the wrong way, you might not see it at 24 frames per second, but you'll feel it. You don't know exactly what it was, but it just won't feel right. And that's why I say that I think the most important work that we do is invisible. Now, I would be remiss if at a conference like this, a technology conference, I didn't at least briefly mention AI. Everybody's thinking about it these days. Today, AI can generate in seconds or minutes what used to take days, weeks, maybe months. It can output thousands of images of a character in a windstorm. But the thing is that if it can do that, and information is widely available, and we all have access to these new tools and things like that, then what's left for each of you? Judgment and taste. Judgment and taste. I want each and every one of you to really, really hear that, because it's really important. Because it takes a human being to look at things and decide, that's the one that helps tell the story. Why? Because they can feel. Because each and every one of us can look at something and feel how it looks. That's important. That's so, so important today. Now, I want to talk a little bit about aiming and how you aim at the right target. Because if this work is invisible and nobody's ever going to see it, and then that means nobody's going to reward me for the right choice or the wrong choice, how do I decide that I'm moving in the right direction? I always start every single thing that I do with these two questions. Who is my audience, and what is my desired outcome? Every single thing, right? So from the individual shots and showing my work at dailies to preparing this speech today, you can use this question anywhere. You can use this question in a tough conversation you have to have with your partner. Who is my audience, and what is my desired outcome? Because we'll talk about this in a second. The thing is that when you start with the end in mind, you can work backwards. You can reverse engineer things. You can say, if I want to get that job at the specific company that you're thinking of, work backwards. What does that person look like? What types of movies are they watching? What types of tutorials? What software do they use? What do you think is on their portfolio? I go as far as to think about what people eat for breakfast, honestly, but that might be a little bit of overkill. But essentially, reverse engineer. Start with the end and work backwards. Now, this is the system. I said I was going to give you 3 things that you can apply in your own life. It's not complicated, but it works. It works amazingly well. Claim the steering wheel. That's your ownership. Move before you're ready. Jump and the landing will appear. That's your courage. And clarity. Aim before you fire. You can think about where you want to end up before you send that first email to that company you admire. Ownership, courage, clarity. What game are you playing? When you walked in today, did you know exactly what you wanted to do with your career? Think about what the right game is for you, where you want to end up, and change the game that you're playing. Let me give you a through line to all of this. Curiosity is the only credential that compounds. Never stop learning. Apply this everywhere. I'm still learning today in every single thing that I'm doing. I learned so much just walking around and talking to each one of you. If you come in with and lead with curiosity, it will serve you so well in this career. Talent is assumed, but trajectory is designed. Say out loud where you want to go. Tell people what it is you want to do. Other people can't help you if they don't know where you're going. There is a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. But nobody's going to want to go with you if you don't tell them where that is. How you do anything is how you do everything. Bring your standards into every single room you go into, every single day. That is very important. The best work that you ever do is invisible. This stuff is not going to show up on a resume. It's the little moments. It's the side conversations. It's the spending 10 extra minutes researching something. It's the stopping to think about how you want to show up in the rooms before you walk into them. The best work you ever do is invisible. And drift is the default. I spent a lot of time in my career that I wish somebody had told me earlier that I could be applying myself more. The system rewards design. So stop playing somebody else's game where they wrote the rules and you didn't get a say in them. Make your own. Now, I want to leave you with one more thing. today. And this is something that is really close to my heart. This is really something that is very important to me. The word creative comes from the Latin creare, to bring forth, to produce, and to make grow. But there's a modern interpretation that I just love. To try something new without expectation of result. And I just think that this is the most beautiful thing in any language. Gets me a little emotional just thinking about it. Because I truly believe that every single one of you is more creative than you realize. And I hope that you will be daring enough to try new things, not because you expect a certain outcome, but because you're willing to find out where that will take you. Obrigado.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question? No?
Oh, I see some hands.
Hello. First, I would like to thank you for the lecture. You talked a little bit about this, but I would like to know more. It's an inevitable question, actually. Is AI used in your work, and how do you address this question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I feel from a student perspective that creative industry are being really threatened by the AI. You can generate a lot of things by the AI, and it's just the beginning. I don't know about, like in 5 years, how things can be. So I'd like to hear more about you.
Sure. So first and foremost, I just want to be really clear. I'm not the AI expert. There's probably many of you who are a lot more in tune with this stuff than I am, but I can give you a little bit of perspective and a few thoughts. I will say these are mostly my own opinions. They are not any official company stance or anything like that, but essentially, all companies are looking into AI. No one wants to be left behind. Nobody wants to be the company that doesn't embrace it and then falls apart. You guys remember Kodak? Kodak? Do you guys know the story of Kodak? So Kodak did this thing where when everything shifted over to digital, they didn't embrace it. They were really slow because they wanted to keep selling film for as long as they could. So they thought if they didn't make digital cameras and they didn't embrace that technology, that people would still need them. Kodak, did they actually go bankrupt? I think they almost went bankrupt. Like they're not what they used to be. Basically, it was self-obsolescence, right? Nobody wants to be Kodak. So everybody's looking into it in some way, shape, or form. And different companies are using them in different capacities for sure. Again, just my opinion. But I get the impression that like Disney, for example, they like artists being behind the work. They like that handcrafted, bespoke nature of things. So I have a feeling that like in terms of artist generation, Disney will be the one that holds on to that, you know, on the longer side of things. Now, like any company, everybody's doing research. A lot of what I've seen and a lot of what I've heard from other people at other companies is like nobody knows exactly how they're going to use it, and so it's a lot of like R&D and trial and error, and like there's like like little isolated labs set up to try things. But at least where I'm at, I'm not seeing anything like major being put in production. Certainly nothing generative. Like every company, we summarize meeting notes and things like that to try and speed up some of the administrative tasks. Which just makes sense. Then we can focus more on the important work and the creativity of things. But I don't see it sort of like, in the very near term, I don't see it overtaking things. But yeah, like everybody else, we're all a little bit scared of these things for sure. The way I see it, right, is, well, I've got two opinions on it, which is, the first is like, a lot of what I'm seeing is like people coming to us with AI, and it's like, here's your solution, you tell us the problem. It's like, here, we have this AI, how do you want to use it? And everybody's like, wait, was something broken? Do I need to? You know, so there's a lot of sort of confusion there, right? The other thing too is like, I think in the midterm, like, there's a lot of opportunities for people who want to work with the AI and to augment their workflows, because the thing is like, guaranteeing that final images look exactly the way you work is still really hard. You can't just type in a prompt and get exactly what you want. So there's still a lot of like interactive work that needs to go into it. So at least for a little while, that's kind of how I see it playing out. But again, this is not my specific area of expertise. That's just kind of what I've witnessed from my perspective. So does that answer your question? Okay. I saw some other hands.
Hello. Okay, sorry. Hello. My question is about the difference between your work in character effects and the animator's work. Because for me, it seems all the same.
Okay, yeah.
Because they work with motion, you work with simulation.
This is the fun part, by the way, guys. These are the extra secrets that I didn't give away in the workshop earlier. This is the good stuff. Great question. So the question was, what's really the difference between animation and character effects? Okay. Man, I had another presentation I did not long ago that had a great slide for this. If I knew you were going to ask that question, I would have brought it. So animation is the character's performance. So I talked about rigging earlier, and they're puppeteers, right? So animation, well, sorry, the rigging builds the strings and the wires that move the puppeteers. The animators are the ones who actually use that. So they're moving the character's limbs and doing their performance. When they send their work to us, we get basically straight, rigid clothes that don't deform, that they don't look like they're draped, they don't look like things flow automatically. When we get it, we then take that performance and we simulate it on top of that. Now, here's the fun part. Animation and character effects have this super long history. Every company I've been at, there's always a tension between the two, right? Animation, like, will do something, and then we work on it, and we kind of work on top of their work, right? Sometimes you got to change some little things and tweak stuff, and they want it to look their way, and we want it to look our way, and they're super creative, and we're very technical, and so we speak two different languages. It's like this big brother, little sister kind of relationship where everybody's kind of like trying to push on things. It's usually ends up being healthy in the end, but there's always just like a little bit of friction between the two departments. We work basically one right after the other, so animation gets their final, and then we pick it up right from there. So we have a very, very close relationship. Everywhere I've been, I make a really big effort to try to bring those two teams together because I've seen that tension between them. So I like to get people in the same room, play some silly little games, humanize people. I don't know if you guys know this or realize this, but like we have so Disney has like a cross site, and every company now has more than one site, right? So this is not a Disney thing, but man, it's funny. Like when you're messaging people or whatever, there's always like, well, why did this person give me this hard shot to work on? Or like, why would they animate? Like, they know this is hard for me. And there's always this like tension. And then you meet that person like in real life and you see them face to face and you're like, oh, hey, how are you? Oh, yeah, that shot, it's a little tough, but yeah, it's good. The dynamic changes. So I always try to like humanize people and bring them together so that we work a little bit better. But yeah, it's just kind of the nature of things that we essentially, I think the best relationship between us is when we're working together. I usually tell our tech anim artists that like when, if they've got a hard shot. So hard shots for us are things like characters hugging, super fast motion where characters are spinning around. If you were in my workshop earlier, you saw the shot of the wind blowing through the one character. So things like that, I usually like to go tell I usually like to sign the shots out early, so our artists have it before animation's done with it. They can see the raw images, the storyboards, and things like that. And then I say, look up who the animator is assigned to the shot, go talk to them. Like, go tell them the problems that you're anticipating. Like, do you think it's going to be hard if the character's limbs are distorted in weird ways? And see if you can find creative solutions to work together, as opposed to just complaining about the, the trouble that they gave you when they were done with the shot when you didn't make any effort to talk to them. So that's usually how I solve that. There's a little bit of an overview in the 30,000-foot view of what we do, but did that answer your question? Yes.
So thank you, Kemer.